Hi, I'm Gary Kim with Spectrum Futures, and I'm here today with Peter Stanforth, who is the CTO and a founder of Spectrum Bridge.
Hey, Gary.
Peter, thanks very much for being with us.
It's a pleasure.
For those who are not familiar with your company, tell us what you do.
So we started Spectrum Bridge as a group of frustrated radio engineers because we had built lots of new technology, but without spectrum to operate in, then there's no business, no solution. So we realized that spectrum was a scarce resource, and in many cases it was a hard resource to get a hold of, and so the whole emphasis of Spectrum Bridge has been on finding spectrum that's underused or poorly used, and either find ways to use it more efficiently or to find ways to share it in a way that makes sense. That it's like we don't build highways and dedicate lanes to individuals. So the same concept is what we're trying to do with spectrum.
Now, in terms of the sharing, technically, how do we produce the sharing?
So there's really a couple of simple steps. The first is to know who is using it, and that can be relatively easy in some cases because if they're licensed, then there's a record of it. In other cases, there may not be a record, so you need other solutions like either registration or sensing or something. And then having agreed or understood who's using it, you have to be able to get to an agreement on what they can tolerate in terms of interference. And once you know what that threshold is, then we can let other people use it as long as we know they won't exceed that threshold. So that becomes a combination of physics and RF propagation to make sure that we permit you to use it. And it's like, I can let you whisper over there and you won't annoy me, but if you're screaming, you may do. So we're trying to sort of make it so that everyone plays nicely together. But it's the combination of knowing who's trying to use it, when and where, coupled with how someone else can use it without creating a mess.
At a very high level, it seems to me you could do this either by having a database that allows you to map where people are supposed to be and where are they right now, and what are the power levels and so forth, or you could embed sensing into devices and allow them to go up and be frequency agile. Which approaches make most sense to you?
So the honest answer is both, right? If you want to start, it's easier to start with a database solution because you can map incumbents and then you can create policies for radios to follow. But if you want to use it really effectively, you need to have sensing because the database is only a best guess. And in some cases it's too complex or things move too quickly. So the ideal situation is a database that explains the policy so that the device knows what the basic parameters are that are legal for it to operate in. And then the device will use sensing to figure out how to work. And the main reason for that is if I have a device that's only listening, then I can't sense it. And some cases I may have spectrum that there are multiple users, and if I sense a user, I need to know, is this a primary or a secondary, is it a licensed or an unlicensed? And the only way to know that property right, if you like, is from a top-down database. But in terms of actual real-time use, sensing is the most efficient way. So in our ideal world, we'll end up with a combination of feedback loops where databases are using sensing and vice versa. But we've tended to start with the databases just because it's a more practical way to start.
Let me switch gears a little bit.
Okay.
You were one of the early supporters and speakers of Spectrum Futures. You get around, you go to a lot of different meetings. Spectrum Futures is different or the same, or what
No,
is it?
I really like Spectrum Futures. So I get involved in a lot of the very technical groups like 3GPP and DSA and the IEEE, and they are very focused on specific either bands of spectrum or technologies or services. And the reality is that in our job we end up having to try to get disparate things to coexist. So maybe the primary user of a spectrum is a cellular carrier and the secondary user might be Wi-Fi. So the nice thing about Spectrum Futures is that you don't have that degree of focus that limits you in effect, right? You've taken a situation where you've sort of stuck your head above the sand and said, what is the bigger picture? It's more than just about a fight between cellular and Wi-Fi, the satellite, and all the broadcast, and then all of the things that are coming that don't fit into one of those buckets. So to me, the nice thing about Spectrum Futures is that you actually look at a broader, higher level view of spectrum and all the issues related to it.
Great. Thanks, Peter.
Hey, it's a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
And thanks for watching PTC TV.